world is on fire, not with bombs, not with bullets, but with tariffs, sanctions, and retaliations that threaten to reshape the global economy for an entire generation. In Washington, one man stands at the center of it all: Donald Trump. And in Beijing, a rising superpower has just delivered its response. This is the story of how Trump's bold tariffs against China ignited a global trade war, and how China struck back harder than anyone expected. Stay with us, because what you're about to hear could affect the price of your groceries, the future of your job, and the stability of the world economy itself. When Donald Trump first entered the political arena, he promised to do something that no other president dared: take on China. For decades, American politicians, Democrats and Republicans alike, had looked the other way as Chinese manufacturing surged. U.S. companies outsourced jobs overseas, and cheap imports flooded American markets. But Trump, he called it out, loudly, aggressively, relentlessly. At rallies across the country, his message was simple: China is ripping us off, and I'm the only one who can stop it. So when Trump returned to power, he wasted no time. He launched a sweeping set of tariffs, taxes on imported Chinese goods, covering everything from steel and aluminum to electronics, furniture, clothing, and even everyday household products. The numbers were staggering. $300 billion worth of Chinese imports suddenly carried new tariffs, some as high as 25%. For Trump, it was a bold economic strike, a way to punish China for what he called unfair trade practices, currency manipulation, and intellectual property theft. But here's the thing about tariffs: they don't just hurt the country you target, they also raise costs for your own consumers. And that's exactly where the story takes its first dramatic twist. Beijing was not going to sit quietly while its most important trading partner slapped massive taxes on its exports. Within weeks, China announced its counterattack. $75 billion worth of American goods, from soybeans to pork, from cars to oil, would now face Chinese tariffs. Farmers in Iowa, hit hard; automakers in Michigan, crushed; tech companies in California, suddenly on edge. And it didn't stop there. China weaponized something even more dangerous: rare earth minerals. These are the raw materials used in smartphones, electric cars, fighter jets, and countless technologies that modern economies depend on. China controls over 80% of global production. And when Beijing hinted at restricting access, Wall Street panicked. The message from China was clear: you hurt us, we'll hurt you back, and maybe harder. Back in the US, the effects of Trump's tariffs spread quickly. Prices at Walmart and Target began to rise. American farmers, who once relied on exporting soybeans to China, saw their markets vanish overnight. The Trump administration responded with tens of billions of dollars in bailout checks to struggling farmers, subsidies designed to keep them afloat while the trade war raged on. But critics were merciless. Democrats called it socialism for farmers and pain for consumers. Even some Republicans warned that Trump's strategy was unsustainable. Yet Trump doubled down. He boasted that tariffs were filling America's coffers with Chinese money, a claim economists quickly debunked. Because here's the reality: tariffs are paid by importers in the US, not by China directly. That means American businesses and ultimately American consumers foot the bill. But for Trump, this wasn't just about economics. It was about power. It was about showing the world, and especially Beijing, that America would no longer play the role of a passive giant. Here's where the story gets bigger, much bigger. When two of the world's largest economies, the US and China, go head-to-head, the rest of the world feels the shockwaves. European companies suddenly faced higher costs as supply chains broke down. Asian markets trembled as investors pulled money out. Developing countries that depended on exports to both nations found themselves caught in the crossfire. The World Trade Organization issued warnings. The International Monetary Fund slashed global growth forecasts, and economists everywhere began whispering a word no one wanted to hear: recession. Trump, of course, dismissed those warnings. He insisted America was winning. He claimed the stock market was booming, unemployment was low, and China was on the ropes. But in Beijing, leaders were playing the long game. They knew that trade wars aren't won in months or even years. They're won in decades. And China was prepared to wait Trump out. So where does that leave us today? A world economy in turmoil. Two superpowers locked in an escalating confrontation. And billions of people caught in the middle. But this is just the beginning. Because China's retaliation is only getting started, and Trump shows no sign of backing down. When Trump fired his opening shot with tariffs, many expected China to bend. After all, the US was the larger consumer market. The logic seemed simple. Beijing needs America more than America needs Beijing. But that assumption was dead wrong. China didn't just retaliate randomly, it chose its targets with surgical precision. Soybeans, America's #1 agricultural export to China. Tariffs of 25% crushed demand overnight. Farmers across the Midwest suddenly faced silos full of unsold crops. Automobiles, US automakers already struggling with shrinking demand, were hit with steep duties, effectively shutting them out of one of the world's fastest-growing car markets. Liquefied natural gas, LNG, a cornerstone of Trump's promised energy dominance. Chinese tariffs made American LNG far less competitive. But China's most devastating move wasn't economic on paper. It was political. By targeting farm states and manufacturing hubs, Beijing zeroed in on Trump's voter base. In Iowa, Ohio, Wisconsin, and Michigan, swing states that helped carry Trump to victory, headlines screamed about family farms going bankrupt and factories announcing layoffs. China was sending a message loud and clear: if you hurt us, we'll make your supporters turn against you. Inside Washington, the trade war unleashed a storm of political division. Republicans in rural states were caught in the crossfire. They wanted to support their president, but they couldn't ignore the pain their constituents were feeling. Town halls filled with angry farmers demanding answers. Democrats, meanwhile, saw an opportunity. They accused Trump of reckless economic brinkmanship, of dragging America into an unnecessary conflict that risked global recession. On Capitol Hill, the hearings began. Economists testified about billions lost. CEOs from Fortune 500 companies warned about supply chains unraveling. And yet, Trump doubled down. At a press conference, he thundered, "We are winning this trade war. China has been ripping us off for decades. They will come to the table because they have no choice." But behind the scenes, his advisors were split. The hawks, figures like Peter Navarro, urged Trump to push harder, to squeeze Beijing until it cracked. The pragmatists, including many in the Treasury, quietly begged for de-escalation, warning of financial meltdown.